Officer Sarah Martinez had been patrolling the quiet streets of Pine Valley for 12 years, but she had never seen anything like what her K9 partner Rex discovered that freezing February morning. The temperature had dropped to minus 15 degrees overnight, and a thick blanket of snow covered everything in sight. Most people stayed indoors, but duty called, and Sarah knew someone had to keep watch over the community. Rex, a German shepherd with an incredible nose for finding people in trouble, suddenly became agitated during their routine patrol. His ears perked up, and he began pulling toward a small wooded area behind the old Methodist church. Sarah trusted Rex completely. He had helped find dozens of missing persons over the years, and his instincts were never wrong. As they pushed through the snow-covered bushes, Rex's barking became more urgent. Sarah's heart began racing when she heard what sounded like crying. Following the sound and Rex's lead, they came upon a sight that would stay with her forever. Huddled behind a fallen tree, barely visible under a thin, torn blanket, were three figures shivering violently in the snow. A woman who looked to be in her early 30s sat with her arms wrapped around two little girls, probably twins around 4 years old. The woman was clearly pregnant, maybe 7 or 8 months along. All three were wearing summer clothes that were completely soaked through. Their lips were blue and they were shaking so hard they could barely speak. Sarah immediately radioed for an ambulance and backup, then rushed to help the family. The woman looked up with tears frozen on her cheeks and whispered in a voice barely above a whisper, "Please help my babies. I don't care what happens to me, just save my girls." The two little girls, who looked identical except for their hair ribbons, were barely conscious and making soft whimpering sounds. Without hesitation, Sarah took off her heavy police jacket and wrapped it around the twins. She activated the hand warmers from her emergency kit and placed them against the children's tiny hands. Rex, sensing the urgency, lay down next to the family, sharing his body heat while Sarah worked to keep them warm until help arrived. The woman's name was Elena Rodriguez, and through chattering teeth she managed to tell Sarah that they had been walking all night. She said they were running from something dangerous, but she was too cold and scared to explain more. Her twin daughters, Maria and Sophia, were so cold they couldn't even cry anymore. They just stared with wide, frightened eyes. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics were shocked by the family's condition. Elena's body temperature was dangerously low, and they worried about the unborn baby. The twins were suffering from severe hypothermia, and their small bodies were struggling to fight off the effects of the brutal cold. As they loaded the family into the heated ambulance, Elena grabbed Sarah's hand with surprising strength and said, "Thank you for saving us. You don't know what you've done." Sarah followed the ambulance to Pine Valley General Hospital, her mind racing with questions. How had a pregnant woman and two small children ended up in the woods in the middle of winter? Where were they running from and why were they dressed for summer weather? Rex sat in the passenger seat, still alert and protective, as if he knew their work wasn't finished yet. At the hospital, Sarah waited in the emergency room while doctors worked to warm up the family and check for any serious injuries. The twins were rushed into separate treatment rooms with nurses rubbing their hands and feet to restore circulation. Elena was taken for emergency tests to make sure her unborn baby was okay after the traumatic night in the cold. Dr. Williams, the emergency room physician, told Sarah that they had arrived just in time. Another hour in those conditions and the story might have had a very different ending. The twins were young and strong, but hypothermia can be deadly, especially for small children. Elena's pregnancy had actually helped keep her body temperature a little higher, but she was still in serious danger when they found her. As Sarah sat in the waiting room, she couldn't stop thinking about Elena's words and the fear she had seen in her eyes. This wasn't just a case of someone getting lost in bad weather. Something had driven this family out into a deadly winter storm, and Sarah was determined to find out what had happened to them. 3 hours later, Dr. Williams gave Sarah the good news. Elena and her twins were stable and warming up nicely. The unborn baby's heartbeat was strong, and there appeared to be no lasting damage from their night in the cold. However, Elena was asking to speak with the officer who had found them, and she seemed very nervous about something. Sarah entered Elena's hospital room to find her sitting up in bed, looking much better but still frightened. The twins were sleeping peacefully in the bed next to her, wrapped in warm blankets and connected to monitors that beeped softly. Elena's eyes filled with tears when she saw Sarah walk in. "Officer, I need to tell you something important," Elena said, her voice shaking slightly. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and we were running from my husband, Carlos. He's not a good man, and last night he tried to hurt me and the girls. I was so scared that I grabbed the twins and ran out of the house without thinking about clothes or anything else. Sarah pulled up a chair and listened carefully as Elena continued her story. Carlos Rodriguez had been controlling and abusive for years, but things had gotten much worse since Elena became pregnant. He had been drinking heavily and using drugs, and the night before, he had threatened to hurt the unborn baby because he didn't want another child to take care of. Elena explained that Carlos had become violent when she tried to protect the twins from his angry outbursts. He had pushed her down and threatened to make sure she never saw her children again. In that moment of terror, Elena had made the desperate decision to take Maria and Sofia and escape into the night. She had planned to walk to her sister's house across town, but she had gotten lost in the dark and ended up in the woods. I know it was stupid to go out in the cold like that, Elena said, crying softly, but I was so afraid of what he might do to us. He said terrible things about the baby, and I couldn't let him hurt my children. I thought we could make it to Rose's house, but everything looked different in the snow. Sarah's heart went out to this brave mother who had risked everything to protect her children. She had seen domestic violence cases before, and she knew how dangerous these situations could become. Elena had made a choice that could have cost her family their lives, but she had done it out of love and desperation. While they talked, Sarah noticed that Elena kept looking toward the door nervously, as if she expected someone to walk in at any moment. When Sarah asked about this, Elena admitted that she was terrified Carlos would find them at the hospital. He had threatened many times to track them down no matter where they went. He has friends everywhere, Elena whispered. He always said he would find us if we ever tried to leave. I'm scared he's already looking for us. What if he comes here? What if he tries to take the girls away from me? Sarah assured Elena that hospital security had been notified, and no one would be allowed to visit without Elena's permission. She also explained that social services and victim advocacy groups could help Elena and her children find a safe place to stay while they figured out their next steps. Just as Sarah was finishing her explanation, her radio crackled to life. The voice of her partner, Officer Johnson, came through clearly. Sarah, we've got a situation. A man named Carlos Rodriguez is at the station demanding to know where his wife and children are. He's very agitated and claims they were kidnapped. He wants to file a missing person report. Elena's face went white and she gripped Sarah's arm tightly. That's him, she whispered urgently. He's already looking for us. Please don't let him know we're here. Please don't let him take my babies. The twins stirred in their sleep as if sensing their mother's fear. Sarah quickly stepped out of the room to speak privately on her radio. She told Officer Johnson to keep Carlos at the station, but not to give him any information about Elena and the children. She also requested that a detective be assigned to interview Carlos about the domestic violence allegations. When Sarah returned to Elena's room, she found the young mother trying to get out of bed despite the protests of a concerned nurse. Elena was determined to take her children and run again, even though she could barely stand after her ordeal in the cold. You can't keep running, Sarah said gently but firmly. There are people who can help you, but you have to trust the system to protect you and your children. Running into another snowstorm won't solve anything, and it could get you all killed. Elena looked at her sleeping daughters and placed a protective hand on her pregnant belly. She knew Sarah was right, but the fear of what Carlos might do was overwhelming. She had lived in terror for so long that running seemed like the only option, even when it meant putting her family in deadly danger. Sarah spent the next hour talking with Elena about domestic violence resources, legal protection orders, and safe housing options. She also called Detective Lisa Chen, who specialized in domestic violence cases and had helped many families escape dangerous situations. As they made plans for Elena's safety, both women knew that the most dangerous time for abuse victims is often when they try to leave their abusers. Carlos would not give up easily, and the next few days would be critical in determining whether Elena and her children could finally find the safety they desperately needed. Detective Lisa Chen arrived at the hospital within an hour, carrying a briefcase full of legal documents and resource information. She had been working domestic violence cases for 8 years and knew exactly what Elena and her children were facing. Lisa was known throughout the department for her dedication to protecting families and her ability to navigate the complex legal system that could either save or fail abuse victims. When Lisa entered Elena's room, She immediately noticed the way the young mother positioned herself protectively between the detective and her sleeping twins. This was typical behavior for trauma survivors, and Lisa approached slowly and spoke in a calm, reassuring voice. "Elena, I'm Detective Chen, and I'm here to help you and your children stay safe," Lisa said, sitting down in the chair that Sarah had vacated. "Officer Martinez told me what happened, and I want you to know that we take domestic violence very seriously. You did an incredibly brave thing by protecting your children, even though you put yourself in danger." Elena studied Lisa's face carefully, looking for any sign that she might not be trustworthy. Too many people had let her down in the past, and she had learned to be cautious about who she allowed into her life. But something about Lisa's gentle manner and professional confidence made Elena feel like maybe, finally, someone might be able to help her family escape their nightmare. Lisa explained that while Carlos was at the police station demanding information about his missing family, officers were also gathering evidence about the domestic violence situation. They had already spoken with neighbors who had heard arguments and seen Elena with suspicious bruises over the past few months. Several people had been worried about the family but hadn't known how to help. "The good news is that we have enough evidence to arrest Carlos on domestic violence charges," Lisa explained. "We found damage to your house that supports your story about the violence, and we have witness statements from people who saw him being aggressive toward you and the children. He won't be coming home tonight." Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her, followed immediately by fear about what would happen next. Carlos had been arrested before for other things, but he always seemed to find a way to get out of trouble. She worried that this time would be no different, and that his anger would be even worse when he was released. Lisa seemed to read Elena's thoughts. "I know you're scared that he'll get out and come after you," she said. "That's why we're going to work together to build a strong case against him and get you the legal protection you need. Tomorrow morning we'll go to court and file for a restraining order that will legally require him to stay away from you and the children." While they talked, the twins began to wake up from their nap. Maria, who was slightly older than Sophia by 12 minutes, sat up and looked around the hospital room with confusion. She had never been in a hospital before, and all the machines and unfamiliar sounds scared her. "Mama, where are we?" Maria asked in a small voice. "I want to go home. I want my stuffed bunny." Elena's heart broke as she realized that in their desperate escape, they had left behind all of the girls' favorite toys and belongings. Everything they owned was still in the house with Carlos, and she didn't know if they would ever be able to go back and get their things safely. Sophia woke up a few minutes later and immediately started crying when she saw all the strangers in the room. Both girls were confused and frightened by everything that had happened, and Elena struggled to find words to explain their situation without terrifying them even more. Lisa, who had experience talking with children in traumatic situations, knelt down beside the hospital bed and spoke gently to the twins. She explained that they were in the hospital because they had gotten very cold, but that the doctors had warmed them up and they were going to be fine. She didn't mention their father or the reasons they had ended up in the snow. "Are we going to live here now?" Sophia asked, looking around the hospital room with wide eyes. "No, sweetie," Elena said, pulling both girls close to her. "We're going to find a new place to live, somewhere safe and warm where we can be happy together." Lisa explained that there was a special shelter for families like theirs, where they could stay while Elena figured out their next steps. The shelter had toys and books for children, and there would be other mothers there who understood what Elena was going through. Most importantly, it was completely confidential, and Carlos would not be able to find them there. Elena was hesitant about going to a shelter. She had heard stories about these places being crowded and uncomfortable, and she worried about exposing her children to other families who might also be dealing with violence and trauma. But Lisa assured her that this particular shelter was different. It was more like a group of small apartments, where families could have privacy while still receiving support and protection. Dr. Williams returned to check on the family and declared that all three were healthy enough to be discharged. Elena's vital signs were normal. The baby's heartbeat remained strong, and the twins showed no signs of lasting damage from their exposure to the cold. However, he recommended that Elena take things easy for the next few days and avoid any additional stress if possible. As evening approached, Lisa helped Elena gather the few belongings the hospital had provided and prepared to transport the family to the safe house. Elena felt nervous about leaving the security of the hospital, But she knew they couldn't stay there forever. She also knew that this was her chance to finally break free from the cycle of fear and violence that had controlled her life for so long. Before they left, Officer Martinez stopped by to check on the family one more time. Rex was with her, and both twins were delighted to see the friendly dog who had helped save their lives. Elena thanked Sarah repeatedly for finding them, and for treating her with such kindness and respect during the most frightening night of her life. The safe house was nothing like Elena had imagined. Located in a quiet residential neighborhood, it looked like an ordinary two-story home with a small front yard and flower boxes in the windows. Lisa explained that this was intentional, as the house was designed to blend in with the surrounding community and not draw attention from people who might be looking for the families staying there. Inside, Elena was pleasantly surprised to find clean, comfortable rooms and a warm, welcoming atmosphere. The house director, a woman named Patricia who had once been in Elena's situation herself, greeted them at the door with hot cocoa for the twins and a gentle smile for their nervous mother. "Welcome to Haven House," Patricia said, leading them to a cozy living room with soft couches and children's books scattered on the coffee table. "This is going to be your home for as long as you need it, and I want you to know that you're completely safe here. No one can find you unless you want them to." The twins were fascinated by the toys and games available in the common areas, and they quickly forgot their earlier fears as they explored their new temporary home. Elena watched them play and felt a sense of relief she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, her children were laughing and acting like normal kids instead of walking on eggshells around their father's unpredictable moods. That evening, while Maria and Sophia played with puzzles in the children's area, Elena sat down with Patricia and Lisa to discuss what would happen next. Lisa explained that Carlos had been formally charged with domestic violence and making threats, and that he would have to appear in court within the next few days. His bail had been set high enough that he would likely remain in jail until his hearing. "Tomorrow morning we'll go to the courthouse and file for a temporary restraining order," Lisa said. "This will legally prohibit Carlos from contacting you or coming near you and the children. If he violates the order, he can be arrested immediately without having to prove that he committed a new crime." Elena nodded, but Patricia could see the worry in her eyes. "What if he doesn't care about the restraining order?" Elena asked. "What if he decides to look for us anyway? He's never cared about following rules before." Patricia understood Elena's concerns because she had felt the same way when she was escaping her own abusive relationship 15 years earlier. "The restraining order is just one layer of protection," she explained. "We also have security cameras around the house, and we work closely with the police department. Officer Martinez and her partner drive by several times each day, and Detective Chen has given us her direct phone number in case of any emergency." Over the next few days, Elena began to settle into a routine at Haven House. The twins attended a small daycare program for children staying at the shelter, where they received counseling to help them process their traumatic experiences. Elena participated in support groups with other mothers and began working with a social worker to plan for their long-term future. One of the most important conversations Elena had was with a victim advocate named Jennifer, who helped her understand her legal rights and options. Jennifer explained that Elena could choose to testify against Carlos in his criminal trial, or she could decide not to participate if she felt it would be too dangerous or traumatic. "The decision is completely yours," Jennifer said during one of their sessions. "The prosecutor has enough evidence from the neighbors and the physical evidence at your house to proceed with the case, even without your testimony. But if you do decide to testify, we can arrange for special protection and support during the trial." Elena struggled with this decision. Part of her wanted Carlos to face the full consequences of his actions, but she was also terrified of what he might do if she testified against him. She had seen how angry he became when he felt betrayed, and she worried that speaking out in court might put her and the children in even more danger. Meanwhile, the twins were slowly beginning to adjust to their new life. Maria, who had always been more outgoing, made friends quickly with the other children at the shelter. Sophia, who was naturally more cautious, took longer to warm up to new people, but eventually began participating in art therapy sessions where she could express her feelings through drawing and painting. Elena was amazed by her daughter's resilience. Despite everything they had been through, they were starting to laugh and play again. They asked about their father occasionally, but they seemed to accept Elena's explanation that they were living somewhere new because it was safer for their family. The most challenging part of Elena's recovery was dealing with her own conflicting emotions about Carlos. Despite all the pain he had caused, she sometimes found herself feeling guilty about having him arrested. They had been together for 6 years, and there had been good times mixed in with the bad. She also worried about how she would support 3 children on her own, especially with a new baby coming. Lisa and Patricia helped Elena understand that these feelings were normal for abuse survivors. "It's not uncommon to have mixed emotions about your abuser," Patricia explained during one of their talks. "The person who hurt you is also the person you once loved and trusted. It takes time to work through those complicated feelings." As Elena's court date approached, she made the difficult decision to testify against Carlos. Jennifer arranged for Elena to visit the courthouse beforehand so she could see the room where the trial would take place and meet the prosecutor who would be asking her questions. They also arranged for Elena to testify via closed-circuit television if she became too nervous to speak in the same room as Carlos. The night before the hearing, Elena sat in her room at Haven House looking at her sleeping daughters and thinking about the future. She placed her hands on her growing belly and whispered to her unborn child, "I promise you'll never have to be afraid the way your sisters were. I promise we're going to build a better life for all of us." The morning of the court hearing, Elena woke up feeling nervous but determined. Jennifer arrived early to drive her to the courthouse, while Patricia stayed behind to watch Maria and Sofia. Elena had decided it would be too traumatic for the twins to see their father in court, even from a distance. At the courthouse, Elena was surprised to see Officer Martinez and Detective Chen waiting for her in the hallway. They had come to provide moral support and to testify about their own involvement in the case. Sarah had brought Rex with her, and the sight of the friendly German shepherd helped calm Elena's nerves. "You don't have to be afraid," Sarah said, gently squeezing Elena's hand. "We're all here to support you, and you're doing the right thing by speaking up. Your daughters are going to be proud of their brave mother someday." The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres, met with Elena before the hearing to review her testimony one more time. He was a kind man with children of his own, and he understood how difficult it was for Elena to face Carlos in court. He assured her that she would have plenty of support and that security guards would be present throughout the hearing. When Elena entered the courtroom, she saw Carlos sitting at the defendant's table with his lawyer. He looked different than she remembered, somehow smaller and less intimidating in his orange jail uniform. He turned to look at her when she walked in, and she felt a familiar flash of fear, but this time she didn't look away. Instead, she held his gaze for a moment before taking her seat. Elena's testimony lasted for almost 2 hours. She told the judge about years of psychological abuse, threats, and escalating violence. She described the night they had fled into the snow and how terrified she had been that Carlos would seriously harm her or the children. Her voice shook at times, but she never stopped talking. The most powerful moment came when the prosecutor asked Elena to describe how the violence had affected her daughters. Elena's eyes filled with tears as she talked about how Maria and Sofia had learned to hide in their bedroom when Carlos became angry, and how they had stopped laughing and playing the way normal children should. "My girls used to be so happy and carefree," Elena said, looking directly at the judge, "but living with their father's anger changed them. They became quiet and scared, always watching to see if he was in a good mood or a bad mood. No child should have to live like that." Carlos's lawyer tried to argue that Elena had exaggerated the abuse and that Carlos had never intended to seriously hurt anyone. He claimed that Carlos had been under stress from work and money problems, and that he loved his family and wanted them to come home. But the evidence against Carlos was overwhelming. Officer Martinez testified about the condition she had found the family in, emphasizing how close Elena and the twins had come to dying from exposure. Detective Chen presented photographs of the damage to their house and played recordings of neighbors describing the arguments and violence they had witnessed. The most damaging testimony came from Carlos's own mother, who had finally decided to tell the truth about her son's behavior. She admitted that she had seen him hit Elena before, and that she had been worried about her granddaughter's safety for months. Through tears, she apologized to Elena for not speaking up sooner. When it was Carlos's turn to speak, he continued to deny the severity of his actions, He claimed that Elena was lying about the abuse and that she had taken the children away to punish him. His anger was evident even in the courtroom, and several times the judge had to tell him to control his tone and language. After hearing all the testimony and reviewing the evidence, Judge Williams delivered a strong verdict. Carlos was sentenced to 2 years in prison for domestic violence and making criminal threats. He was also ordered to complete anger management and substance abuse counseling, and he was prohibited from contacting Elena or the children for 5 years after his release. Elena felt a mixture of relief and sadness as she listened to the sentence. She was grateful that Carlos would be in prison and unable to hurt them, but she also felt sad that their family had been destroyed by his choices. She thought about the man she had fallen in love with years ago and wondered how they had ended up in this courtroom. Outside the courthouse, Elena was surrounded by the team of people who had helped her through the legal process. Jennifer hugged her tightly and told her how proud she was of Elena's courage. Lisa and Sarah promised that they would continue to check on the family and provide whatever support they needed. The local newspaper had heard about the case and wanted to interview Elena about her experience. She agreed to speak with a reporter, hoping that sharing her story might help other women who were trapped in abusive relationships. The article that appeared the following week described Elena as a hero who had risked everything to protect her children. When Elena returned to Haven House that afternoon, she found Maria and Sophia playing in the backyard with some of the other children. They ran to her excitedly, asking if they could stay at the shelter forever because they liked having so many friends to play with. Elena laughed and hugged them, realizing that her daughters were finally beginning to heal from their traumatic experiences. That evening, Patricia helped Elena look at apartments in a different part of town, far from the neighborhood where Carlos knew people. Elena had been approved for government assistance that would help her pay rent and buy groceries until she could find a job and get back on her feet. Financially, Elena was also working with a counselor who specialized in helping abuse survivors rebuild their lives. The counselor had helped Elena understand that leaving an abusive relationship was just the first step in a long process of healing and recovery. She still had difficult days when she felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising 3 children alone. But she also had hopeful days when she could see a positive future for her family. As Elena prepared for bed that night, she felt her baby kick strongly inside her belly. She smiled and whispered, "You're going to be born into a peaceful home, little one. Your sisters and I are going to make sure you never know what it's like to be afraid of someone who is supposed to love you." 6 months after that terrifying night in the snow, Elena gave birth to a healthy baby boy she named David, after her father who had always been her hero. The delivery took place at Pine Valley General Hospital, the same place where she and the twins had been treated for hypothermia. This time, however, Elena entered the hospital as a confident, independent woman surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her well-being. Officer Martinez and Rex were among the first visitors to meet baby David. Sarah had stayed in touch with Elena throughout her pregnancy, and the two women had developed a friendship that went beyond their initial meeting. During that emergency rescue, Sarah often brought Rex to visit Maria and Sophia at their new apartment, and the twins loved playing with the gentle police dog who had helped save their lives. Elena's new apartment was small but comfortable, located in a safe neighborhood with good schools for the twins. She had decorated it with bright colors and filled it with the sounds of laughter and children's voices. The walls were covered with Maria and Sophia's artwork from their therapy sessions, and there were family photos that showed all of them smiling genuinely for the first time in years. Detective Chen had also remained involved in Elena's life, helping her navigate various legal and practical challenges that arose during her transition to independence. Lisa had connected Elena with job, training programs, and helped her enroll in community college classes so she could eventually support her family without relying on government assistance. Elena found work at a local daycare center, where her natural ability to understand and comfort children made her a valuable employee. The job allowed her to bring baby David with her to work, and Maria and Sophia could attend the center's after-school program. Elena's supervisor, who knew about her background, was impressed by her dedication and empathy toward children who came from difficult family situations. The twins had thrived in their new environment. Maria had become one of the top students in her kindergarten class and had discovered a love for reading that surprised everyone. Sophia had found her voice through art therapy and was creating beautiful drawings and paintings that showed how much happier and more secure she felt in their new life. Both girls still went to counseling once a week to continue processing their experiences, but their therapist reported that they were making excellent progress. They rarely asked about their father anymore, and when they did, Elena was able to answer their questions honestly but age-appropriately. 1 year after the rescue, Officer Martinez organized a special ceremony to honor Elena's courage and to raise awareness about domestic violence in the community. The event was held at the community center, and Elena was surprised to see how many people attended to show their support for her family. Elena spoke to the crowd about her experience, emphasizing that domestic violence can happen to anyone regardless of their background or circumstances. She encouraged other women who might be in abusive relationships to seek help and reminded them that there were people and resources available to support them through the process of leaving safely. I used to think I was trapped, and that there was no way out, Elena told the audience. But I learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is nothing. My children and I nearly died that night in the snow, but we also found our freedom. If you're living in fear, please don't wait for things to get better on their own. There are people who want to help you, and you deserve to live without fear. Patricia from Haven House was in the audience, and later told Elena how proud she was of the progress Elena had made. Many women struggled for years to rebuild their confidence and independence after leaving abusive relationships. But Elena had embraced every opportunity to create a better life for herself and her children. The ceremony also included a presentation to Rex, who received a special commendation for his role in finding the family that winter night. The German Shepherd seemed to understand that he was being honored, and he sat perfectly still, while the mayor placed a special collar around his neck that recognized him as a hero dog. Elena's sister Rosa, who lived across town, had become a regular part of their lives again. Rosa felt guilty that she hadn't realized how bad Elena's situation had become, but Elena assured her that she had hidden the abuse well, and that many people in abusive relationships become isolated from their support systems. As Elena's story spread through the community and beyond, she began receiving letters from other women who had survived domestic violence or who were currently trying to leave abusive relationships. Some of them shared their own stories, while others simply thanked Elena for giving them hope that they could also build new lives for themselves and their children. Elena kept all of these letters in a special box and planned to share them with Maria and Sophia when they were older. She wanted her daughters to understand the impact their family's story had on others, and to know that something positive had come from their difficult experiences. 3 years after that night in the snow, Elena graduated from community college with a degree in social work. She had been inspired by all the people who had helped her family, and she wanted to spend her career helping other families in crisis. Her professors were impressed by her dedication and practical experience, and she quickly found a job working with Child Protective Services. Elena's new job allowed her to help children and families who were dealing with abuse, neglect, and other traumatic situations. She often thought about how different her life might have been if Officer Martinez and Rex hadn't found them that night. And she was motivated to make sure other families received the help they needed before reaching such a desperate point. On the 5th anniversary of their rescue, Elena took Maria, Sophia, and David to visit the spot behind the Methodist church where they had been found. The children, now 9-year-old twins and an energetic 5-year-old boy, listened as Elena told them the complete story of that night and how it had changed their lives forever. "We were so scared and cold," Elena said, holding all 3 of her children close. "But sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to the best parts of our story. If we hadn't been found that night, you might not have grown up to be the happy, confident children you are today. And I might never have found the strength to become the person I was meant to be." Maria, Sophia, and David looked up at their mother with admiration and love. They understood that their family had been through something difficult, but they also knew that they were safe, loved, and surrounded by people who cared about them. Most importantly, they had learned from their mother's example that even in the darkest moments there is always hope for a better tomorrow.